Well, this will be of very little interest to a lot of people, but somebody had asked how it was coming on that 47 Chevy, the Fleetmaster that I have owned for many years. Well, in theory, the kingpins that are in here, this doesn't use ball joints like newer cars. They use a kingpin that runs through here, and that allows the steering to pivot. In theory, they're free floating. There's bushing here, bushing there, and the pin is held in place in the center with this wedge bolt. Well, the theory is you take that wedge bolt out and the cap's off the ends and you can just tap it out of there. It's supposed to float freely. Well, after all these years, it's been in there since it was new. There is no float left in that thing. She is locked in there. So in order to get them apart, I couldn't beating on it. It just wasn't going to move. So what I have done is taken the whole assembly out by taking the bolts loose on the top and the bottom. Now, every time I do something like this on this, it digs into a further hole. But, so now, I got it out where I can get at it so I can replace those kingpins. I should be able to put it even in the press and press them out. Because the problem is, you got that linkage that's right in the way, so you can't get a good straight smack at it. But I think I could put it in the press it part way, cut off, press it another, I think I can do it that way and get it out of there. But then I got to get the old bushings out, which are in theory free float. They're not supposed to be reamed, they're supposed to fit in there. So we'll see, but I got these parts out of here anyway. But in taking them out, that involves taking loose the bottom pin that held it in, which was this one, which wasn't too bad, though, like right here, you can see there's wear on it. So I'm going to end up replacing them. And the top one, which is really complicated because it has the eccentric that adjusts for caster and camber in a tricky way. This is the kind of thing where a manual is really handy, because in order to get this part out, you have to figure out that underneath this grease zerk there's an Allen slot that you get an Allen wrench in there, and that's what you can turn it out with. Otherwise, it flopped back and forth, but it wasn't coming out of there. So I figured to get that out, but now I find I've got a lot of play in these. Well, they got to be replaced too. And I can get them. And another thing I find, my shock is doing no shocking whatsoever. These use a knee action type shock absorber. It's almost like a Fleetmaster cylinder that sits up here that has the mechanism to do the shocking. And there's very little there. I can feel a little bit of hesitation, so there's a little fluid left in there. But I get a little of this side-to-side movement. Well, that's going to throw my whole wheel assembly off too. So the next step, I'm going to have to pull these shocks off and rebuild them, because I think I'll have to put new bushings in here. So it's one of these, like I say, everything you take apart, you go a little bit deeper into it, you find more problems. But I'm pretty much to the end of it. If I get the shock situation straightened away, then I also, as part of the kit with these pins, they sell a kit that gives you all like new rubber snubbers, like this one, which is bad. And on these A-frames on the lower that hold the springs on, there's bushings there that are the same design as what these other ones that wore out. So I got to take it for granted they're wore out too. You replace those bushings, and there's a cross arm that goes, a kind of a shaft that goes across to the other side. So I might as well do them too. So like I say, it just gets deeper because I know, but at least that's the end of it. You know, I'm out of suspension on the front then. You know, there's nothing else I have to replace. The back is going to be a whole nother experience. But, yeah, I can feel there's a little bit of shock, but not much. But like I say, these have got fluid in them. You got to add fluid. There's a cap up on top. But knowing that those bushings are bad, I'm going to have to go at them. Or you're going to get a rock every time you hit the brakes and just going down the road. You know, it's, as long as I'm this far, I'm going to continue on. You know, I'm not in a hurry for it. I'd sooner do it right. Though the kit is going to cost about $300 for all of the components that I need to replace these. Though that kit also comes with the kingpins, but I already have the kingpins. But at least now I can start rebuilding them. And then as I can, you know, that this bottom bushing that comes out to be replaced, because like I say, you see a little wear on that. So all of those parts come in that kit, but it's about a $300 kit. But I'm not in a hurry. I would sooner do it right. I'm glad I parked it under a shady spot. I'll tell you that, because, you know, I was thinking, oh, kingpin's no big deal. Well, it's getting to be a little more of a big deal. One thing I was going to mention on something like this, like where they have that Allen screw hidden underneath that cap, this is where, without a manual, you would really struggle. You know, I have the shop manual for this, but also these Chilton manuals, these big old ones, these are great if you've got an older car, and these cover all models. You know, it's not specific to just Chevys, though I have, like I said, the Chevy manual. But this covers all the cars from 40 to 53. And if you remember, I bought a whole big box full of those Chilton's manuals at one time at a rummage sale. If you ever run across any of those big Chilton manuals like that, even if it isn't for a vehicle you have, you really got to buy them. You know, because if you need one, or if somebody you know needs one, you know, like that big box full, it's been very handy. And my brother's working on his Chevelle, that older Chevelle, and he's got an older Nova. Well, those things come in handy. You know, you got the information that you need for, even, like I say, this is for adjusting the caster and camber. Well, it tells you how to do it and how many degrees it needs to be, you know, that sort of thing. It's hard to get that information. So, never pass up one of those manuals if you see them. That's why when I ran into them at that rummage sale, that whole big box full, and I don't know, I can't remember what I paid. It was maybe like $15 for, it had to be like 20 manuals, but it's just a great storehouse of information for working on older cars, because these things can save you so many times. You know, it just, you never pass them up. You know, there's a lot of general information in the front, but then it goes into the particular vehicles. You know, like even the Carter carburetor thing, when I was rebuilding the carburetor on this, it was great. I could find the stuff I needed to know in here. You know, manuals are just not something you ever want to pass up. I've got a pile of manuals for stuff that I don't own, but I never pass them up, because it just saves you a lot of aggravation. Because Though these are rather straightforward, there's still tricky little things like hiding that Allen screw underneath the grease zerk. You know, if you didn't know about it, you could never get this thing apart. But that's where I'm at this. It's, like I say, not something I'm in a hurry for it. So as I can spare the money, I keep buying new parts. But like I say, I'm at the end of that, at least on the suspension part of it. Well, and really, the only problem I have with this was in the suspension. But that makes me think too, I should mention, on these older cars, and they did this for a long time, you know, everything has got grease zerks on it. A grease gun is your friend. It'll save you a lot of aggravation. You know, it's a nuisance to have to grease like my M37. I grease that regularly, but if you don't, you run into problems like this. Now, I always greased this when I had it, but before I got it, you know, it had like 60,000 miles on it or something when I got it. It might have never been greased before that. So, you don't know, you know, but it pays to. It's frustrating having to crawl around underneath and grease them, and there's zerks all over the place, and if you don't know where they are, that's where a manual will tell you where they are, but you have to grease them. But it's, you know, like all farm machinery is that way too. There's like a combine. You start greasing on a combine, there's a lot of zerks on them. But it could, you know, all of this damage really was done, well, it's just a matter of time. You know, like the shotguns will be at a war like that. You know, things like that aren't going to run forever. You have to rebuild them. But at least it can be rebuilt. Which leads me to another, I'll do a whole nother video on it. But it's to do with my my rototiller. The motor on that, which is really not rebuildable. I've got that all tore apart. But that'll be a different video. I'll maybe film that today, but I'll turn that loose tomorrow.